I will be with you always, even to the end of the world. Here's the one of authority telling us to go out. Is that an option? No, it's a command. Jesus is authority who prepares us for ministry, and he tells us to go out. But we also need to understand that doors are open to let in. Not only do we go out, but we bring people in. Ministry efforts at First Church of Christ impact this community. We bring people in to the family of God. We share the love of Jesus with our neighbors. We give food in the name of Jesus. We assist with other various local ministries in the name of Christ. It is the job of the church to build those up who are coming in. And I want you to understand something. Doors are nothing less than opportunities for service. We need to recognize when the doors are open, and we need to walk through them. We can't say this is an option. If the door's wide open, if the Spirit of God is prompting our hearts to move through that door, we need to move. But we also need to be careful not to attempt to force open doors that God closes. Jesus said, I have the key. And the door that I open, I open. The door that I shut, I shut. Pushing our own agendas over the leadership of God and over the guidance of the Holy Spirit is not of God. Now, that doesn't mean we sit back and do nothing or we wait around. We need to be aggressive and we need to be assertive, but we need to be within God's will, and we need to clearly see where he opens those doors and where we sometimes run into brick walls. We need to be up to date with our message. We have to continue to present Jesus Christ to today's society. And my question is, are we really prepared to reach out to the hurts and to the needs of the 21st century? Even though people act and think differently than they did 50 years ago, they still need Jesus. You understand that? Even though this is not the same America it was 50 years ago, people still need Jesus. Methods and styles of worship obviously have changed over the last 50 years. But I am here to tell you today that the gospel of Jesus Christ has not changed. It is still good news. It is still salvation to those who believe and those who follow Christ. We cannot be faithful to what we do not know, and we will not be faithful to what we do not live. We need to understand that this community, this world that we live in, is an open door of opportunity. And there's still a commission out there. There's still a command from Jesus, who has all authority, that we go out and we preach the gospel and we baptize them into Christ and we teach them to live for him. And we really cannot shirk that responsibility. So we need to be prepared for ministry. Thirdly, we need to concentrate on what is ahead. We can look back at our mistakes. We can look back at our flaws. We can look back at the things that have pulled us down and kept us apart from God or apart from each other, and we can wring our hands all day long over that, or we can concentrate on what is ahead. Look at verses 11 through 13 of Revelation 3. Jesus says this, I am coming soon. Hold on to what you have, so that no one will take your crown. Him who overcomes, I will make a pillar in the temple of my God. Never again will he leave it. I will write on him the name of my God and the name of the city of my God, the New Jerusalem, which is coming down out of heaven from my God. And I will also write on him my new name. He who has an ear, let him hear what the Spirit says to the churches. Let's concentrate on what's ahead, folks. Let's be persistent in obedience. Let's persist in obedience. A command is non-negotiable. Our lives should be built around the non-negotiables. Jesus commanded us to go into the world and to share his love. It's not an option. Let's be persistent in obedience. Let's obey that. Let's follow him. Let's concentrate on what is ahead. We need to be patient in endurance. It's always easier to swim with the current. But in order to survive, and in order to continue the life of salmon, this adult salmon must swim upstream against the current to spawn. And I can tell you something. We all know this, living around Sault Ste. Marie. Ships are safest when they're anchored in the harbor. But ships were not built to be anchored, were they? Ships were built to be on the open sea. Ships were built to withstand the waves and the winds and the storms. Not to stay in the harbor where it's safe, but to deliver whatever the ship is carrying to its destination. We are carrying salvation. We are the messengers. And we need to understand that we must be patient in endurance. We also need to be diligent in our integrity. Let's be diligent in our integrity. Integrity says there are bigger things at stake than some of the things we want to fuss about here and now. Integrity says there is more below the surface than what we see. Have you ever seen an iceberg and how much of the ice is actually below the water versus what you see above the water? If you haven't really paid attention to that, I'm going to give you a piece of homework. I'm going to give you an assignment. Go home this afternoon, go to your refrigerator, pull out an ice cube. Place that ice cube in a clear glass and put water in the glass and see what happens to the ice. How much of the cube is actually floating above the water and how much is below it? It's the same proportion you'll see with an iceberg. There's about 3/4 of the entire amount of ice that stays below the water where it cannot be seen, but it supports what you do see. And that's what happens when we are people of integrity. There's a whole lot more below the surface than what people see. What they see above the surface is there only because what's below the surface is supporting it. That's integrity. Integrity says it's worth the wait. And so we need to understand who Jesus is. We need to be prepared for ministry. We need to concentrate on what's ahead. But finally, we need to measure our success. There are ways of measuring whether we're doing a good job or not. Jesus is saying, look, you do a good job, I'm going to give a reward. And there's ways of measuring that. Consistency brings victory. Consistency brings victory. I want you to consider the life of a certain man. In 16, his family was forced out of their home. He had to work to support them as a young boy. In 32, he ran for the state legislature. He lost the election, then lost his job. In 33, he borrowed some money from a friend to begin a business, and by the end of that year, he was bankrupt. He spent the next 17 years of his life paying off the debt. In 35, he became engaged to be married, but his sweetheart died. And his heart was broken and he never got over it. In 36, he had a nervous breakdown and was in bed for 6 months. In 38, he sought to become Speaker of the state legislature and was defeated. In 40, he sought to become an elector and was defeated. In 43, he ran for Congress and lost. In 54, he ran for the Senate of the United States. He lost. In 56, he sought the vice presidential nomination of his party's national convention, and he received less than 100 delegate votes. In 1860, he was finally elected President of the United States. His name was Abraham Lincoln. And Abraham Lincoln did not park by his setbacks. He continued to progress forward. Consistency brings victory. Secondly, please understand that willingness will bring opportunity. You remember the story of Jesus having a crowd of people following him around the shore of the Sea of Galilee, miles away from any village, miles away from any store, having preached and having healed and having blessed these people. There was a multitude. We're told that there were 5,000 men, let alone the women and children who were there. And the sun was starting to set. Jesus' disciples said, Lord, you know, it's been a long day, and the sun is setting, and these people haven't eaten. You better dismiss the crowd so they can go back to their homes or go back to the villages and find something to eat. And Jesus' response was, you feed them. You feed them. What? How can we feed all these thousands of people? You find out what's out there. Finally, one of the disciples, this is from John chapter 6, one of the disciples brought a little boy. And he said, in the whole crowd, we found one mama who prepared her son's lunch. There are 5 small loaves of bread and a couple of broiled fish. And Jesus said, you set everyone down in groups. And Jesus took from that boy that basket of 5 small loaves and 2 broiled fish. He thanked God, and then he started feeding and feeding and feeding and feeding and feeding until there were basketfuls of food taken up afterwards. Now, what would have happened if the little boy said, my mama gave this to me and she told me not to share? What would have happened? There would have been very little faith that day in the sight of all the thousands, let alone in the eyes of these apostles of Jesus. Willingness brings opportunity. He was willing to share what he had, and Jesus blessed it. Don't hold it back. He's given it to you so you can give it to others. Be willing to share. And faithfulness brings results. One stormy night, an elderly couple entered the lobby of a small hotel, and they asked for a room. The clerk said that they were filled, as were all the other hotels in town. But he said, I can't let a fine couple like you out in the rain. Would you be willing to sleep in my room? The couple hesitated, but the clerk insisted. The next morning, when the man paid his bill, he said, you're the kind of man who should be managing the best hotel in the United States. Someday, I'll build it for you. And the clerk smiled politely. A few years later, the clerk received a letter from that elderly man, recalling the stormy night and asking him to come to New York. A round-trip ticket was enclosed, and when the clerk arrived, his host took him to the corner of 5th Avenue and 34th Street, where stood a magnificent new building. That, he said to the man, that is the hotel I have built for you to manage. The man was William Waldorf Astor, and the hotel was the original Waldorf Astoria. That young clerk, George C. Bolt, became its first manager. Why? Because faithfulness brings results. Jesus said over and over again, be faithful in little, I'll give you much. Faithfulness to Jesus Christ brings result. Consistency brings victory. Willingness brings opportunity. Faithfulness brings results. Now, I want you to know something. Our estimated time of arrivals, our ETAs, we're going to be different. But we're all going to be able to see Jesus face to face one day. And we need to diligently pursue our safe arrival to our eternal home. So if we're going to do that, let's understand that we need to acknowledge who Jesus really is. We need to take seriously our opportunities for ministry and for mission. And we need to be prepared for what the Lord has in mind for us. Don't tell God what you're going to do. Instead, be ready to do what He wants you to do. Let Him be the potter and you be the clay. Let Him change you from the inside out. Let's be people who are faithful. Let's be people who love Jesus with all our hearts. Let's be the Church of Philadelphia and be the ones who are going to give their all to Jesus Christ and will receive that reward that we are so longing to see. This morning, if you're outside of the love of Jesus, we invite you. We invite you. It's not just us inviting you, it's Jesus who invites you. Next week, when we finish up this series, we have that famous statement of, behold, I stand at the door and knock. And if you hear my voice and you open the door, I can come in. He's inviting you today. You don't have to wait until we talk about Laodicea next Sunday. If you need Jesus, you can come and commit your heart to Him today.